for joining the National Black Environmental Justice webinar today. Fossil Fuel Foolery 2.0. We have Jacqui Patterson with us from the NAACP's Environmental Justice and Climate Justice Program, who will be walking us through this fantastic 2.0 report. I don't know if you've read it, the first one that was put out, but it's always quite revealing. And I always love the cartoons that she happens to find to put in there. It adds a little levity to it, but it's rooted in the soundness of what we need to be worried about and thinking through when we're talking about climate solutions in the context of climate change. And so we have an hour, and I want to give Jacqui as much time as possible to go through her presentation with us, but we'll have time for question and answers at the end. But please feel free to use the chat box to drop questions in there as well. I may not get to them, but they're there so that between Jacqui and myself, we will be able to get you guys some answers. Okay, so Jacqui, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us today. It's happy to see you and happy to hear from you today.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Tina, for organizing this. It's so great to see you all. Looking forward to having this conversation with you. Yeah, so I thought, so let me just share my screen. And so actually I love even though we just put out 2.0, I love the original cover. So I use that as a cover for this presentation, just because it is just so graphic. And so I, and just kind of give you a sense of kind of the overview of it. So first I'll just this primer, why we're calling it a primer as well. And then we'll do an overview of the top examples of each one. About the reality versus the myth that they advance. Things that people are all very much.
Jacqui, your audio is difficult to hear you, Jacqui. Sorry.
I hear some background that's not on my end.
Okay, I just muted. I just found the person. Sorry for that. Go ahead.
I'm just sitting in a silent hotel. Okay, so yeah, first I want to just start us with kind of what's at stake and what people are already experiencing at the hands of the fossil fuel industry, and really grounding us in, as we know, our principles of democratic organizing, and meaning including letting people speak for themselves. And so I always like to start with having people actually speaking for themselves. And so one here from the community in Baytown, Texas, which is on the front lines of the fossil fuel based energy production. So let me switch that screen. Okay. If you have trouble hearing. Okay, sorry about that.
We're so used to it.
Hold on one second.
of old money lowered to middle-class families and pollution. But if you get a job at a chemical plant, you don't have time to think of a solution. I guess my brother, my uncle, and my cousins are sellouts because they went industrial instead of the drug route. Refinery city lights and pipes run along the Gulf Coast. The smoke boasts with sulfur air. It's a wonder. No one's able to take a breath. We're so used to it, we forget. Soon, the sons and daughters won't be able to drink the water. They say the first priority is the people. But the people are the ones being excluded and uprooted. Just ask Archie, ask George Washington Carver Elementary, or ask the suburban lands. Exxon Sacrifice, AKA Brownwood Neighborhood. God bless social media, but Flint ain't the only case of complexion without protection. Baytown, AKA Dirty Bay, is surrounded by giant toxins, threatening the city in every way. We see the huge still from our window sills, make jokes as we choke. We've been possibly dying from this kind of poison oak. It's no mystery that the Black and brown communities are being targeted. Black lives matter, but not when they're expendable and making money is good for the market. Give them a fine, it's fine. They can afford it. We live with the headaches, the shortness of breath, the watery eyes. They keep building, we pay for it. Constantly trying to heal ourselves and repel the environmental destruction. Breathe it in. And breathe out.
Okay, so that gives you a bit of a grounding of really what communities are experiencing and their own analysis of the political interconnectedness of why they're facing what they're facing unabated. So we'll just give a bit of just share a little bit more about the actual report. And so the NAACP, of course, is always constantly under pressure to really carry water for the fossil fuel industry, constantly being under barrage of at the local level, at the national level, to co-sign the actions of the fossil fuel industry. And too often they're either, hopefully you can hear me. Let's see. Chat, so make sure not to anything. So too often they're either trying to buy the participation of our communities in supporting the work of the fossil fuel industry, or they are, and feel free to, if there's any kind of issue with the audio or anything, Tina, feel free to just burst in because I can't really see the chat. So they're either trying to buy participation or they're building relationships. A lot of them might have historical relationships with the NAACP folks or friends and otherwise that they really call into play, especially now that the fossil fuel industry is so much under threat. And then they also try to cajole in terms of really using an equity frame and being very, very manipulative in saying that, that their industry, I was just on a panel yesterday with someone who was basically talking about all the jobs that will be lost and who will be first impacted and worst by the job loss and so forth. So there's multiple ways that they try to engage with our communities. And what's happening is that so often the entities that have a counter argument in terms of what they're bringing are either not speaking our language, don't have the relationships, and largely it's that, not speaking our language, don't have the relationships, and then sometimes not even really giving it a real try in terms of trying to educate or engage with our communities. And so these are the challenges that we're up against. And while we feel like we need to make sure that we're presenting this information in a accessible way for our communities, B, we have a real ground game in terms of investing in frontline, in folks who are working on the front lines in terms of regional organizers to really work with our communities. And then also trying to work with these various other entities that are out there trying to engage with our communities to make sure that they have a better sense of how to engage with our communities. That's why we put out documents like "And the People Shall Lead" that really talks about some of the challenges with engaging with our communities. And so this is just yet another piece along the lines of trying to make this information accessible in terms of the tactics of the industry. And the best praise that we got was when someone tweeted and said, finally something I can understand about this stuff. And so that is exactly what we were looking for, something that we were presenting something that's actually accessible. And so these are the top 10 tactics that we put forward: investing in efforts to undermine democracy, financing political campaigns and pressuring politicians, funding scientists and scientific institutions to publish biased research studies, contending that government regulations hurt the economy, ratepayers, and people with low wealth, denying or understating harms that polluting facilities cause to people and the environment, deflecting responsibility, shifting blame to the very communities they pollute, exaggerating the level of job creation and downplaying the lack of safety, pacifying or co-opting community leaders and organizations, and misrepresenting the interests and opinions of communities, praising false solutions while claiming that real solutions are impractical or impossible, and embracing renewables, but yet seeking to control the new energy economy and quell energy sovereignty. So just going through them one by one and providing a few examples, the efforts that undermine democracy really, as you know, just all of the voter suppression efforts that are happening right up until recently with what's happening in Georgia. This is the founder of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everyone to vote. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down. This is the person who founded ALEC, which does so much of the model legislation that ends up on the floors of our legislators at the state level, at the federal level, and so forth, and even resolutions at the organizational level. And so we have this, this landscape of just rampant voter suppression. We've seen all that has gone on since the election. We saw that all that went on before the election, and it's all about basically race-based, keeping people out of the voting booths and out of power to the greatest extent possible. And so a very recent example with Duke Energy, where they donated more than $500,000 through its PAC, its Political Action Committee, to members of Congress who voted to object to the certification of the 2020 U.S. election results. And so they actually announced this pause of their PAC contributions to federal candidates, but when they put out their policy around political and lobbying expenditures, it didn't make any mention of this pause or any pledge around support for anti-democracy politicians, or to end support for any democracy politicians. And so this is what we're seeing. And so we see this ongoing kind of support for voter suppression laws and so forth. And so given the challenges with we have Citizens United, which folks are actively trying to repeal and so forth, we still have this ongoing challenge with the financing of political campaigns and therefore pressuring politicians. And we see how that plays out in so many ways. After we put out our first Fossil Fuel 2.0 report, they passed this policy in Ohio, which provides subsidies for nuclear and coal. And the Ohio Republican House Speaker, who was a big champion for this HB 6, last year ended up being arrested in connection with a $60 million bribery scheme involving First Energy Corporation. And so this is, and you know, paying not only him, but also other folks to lobby to put through policies like HB6. And so there's just a direct, insidious and pervasive and very well-financed agenda against the interests of our communities, and our legislators are inextricably enmeshed in that. And it's fairly blatant, you know, as we saw that. I mean, $60 million. I mean, how does that even happen? I mean, let's talk about hiding in plain sight. I mean, it's so blatant and so, as I say, pervasive. Funding scientists and scientific institutions to publish biased research studies. So Colorado State University named their College of Natural Resources after Ed Warner, a known fracking tycoon, after he gave $30 million endowment to the university. They also accepted $5 million from Exxon to study the impact of natural gas drilling on wildlife. And of course, and so you see this from Exxon's webpage there, there's an image of their hydraulic fracturing, protecting communities and the environment. I mean, to see all of that in the same headline, it should be protecting communities and the environment from hydraulic fracturing, but it makes it sound like you can actually do hydraulic fracturing while protecting communities and the environment. And so the CSU report, after getting $5 million from Exxon, came out saying that, you know, really saying that clean energy and renewable energy systems are impractical, and actually refuting the existence of climate change. This is a university of supposed scientists refuting the existence of climate change and the role of humans in advancing climate change. And so, you know, this again, well-financed effort to really deny science is just, again, pervasive and causing just extreme harm. Contending that government regulations hurt the economy, ratepayers, and people with low wealth, even though, again, the proof is in the pudding, but yet they continue to contend this. So, for example, with in Alaska, with Mayor Harry Brower of the North Slope Borough, he really pressured policies that pushed banks to limit or restrict funding for gas and oil projects in that area. And he actually called these racialized policies that sought to harm Alaskan Natives and Inuit community who live in the area that rely on the oil and gas industry for their livelihoods. Similarly with Senators Murkowski and Dan Sullivan, providing testimony that emphasized the beauty of Alaska's landscape that has thrived over the years with drilling and development. So again, these are the kind of things. And so this is an op-ed from Mayor Brower, where the subject or the title, Goldman Sachs to Native Alaskans Drop Dead. And that is because they claim to value stakeholder engagement, and they dropped the Arctic drilling from their investments. And so he basically said that was them telling Alaskan Natives to drop dead. And so again, we have this prior administration that really propped up this dying, what should be a dying industry, because certainly our communities are dying because of their actions. And so he continues to kind of try to infuse life into the fossil fuel industry, even though we all know that it should be being rapidly phased out. Denying or understating the harms that polluting facilities cause to people and the environment. So I don't know if you can read the caption, but it's a Nuclear Power Inc. First, we have to convince the people that good health isn't everything. So these are the kinds of, I mean, it's almost that blatant. And so who's paying the price? I say our folks from, I said Joe Womack and Ramsey Sprague on the call. So again, Mobile County, Alabama, where the Mobile Gas Service Corps caused that major spill. They quote unquote cleaned it up by digging this 3-foot hole in the ground, claiming that the amount lost in the spill has quote unquote always been safe, but yet we've seen the continued health challenges that people have had and that the respiratory illnesses continue, and that in the context of COVID-19, this was a hotspot for COVID-19, and there's a direct tie, as we've seen in article after article, between the air that we breathe and our vulnerability to COVID-19. And so again, this notion of just, if we just kind of got rid of these pesky government regulations, then we would all be better off, when it's hanging over. Doing so is like hanging a sword of Damocles over our heads. And so, another little break from my yammering away. So we know groups like the Koch brothers have had an outsized influence on the situation. And so a little bit of a video, which time I'm going to get the audio correct, but from the Koch brothers and their quote unquote amazing climate change denial machine, video that was put together by Greenpeace. Stop sharing and go back. And
of over $21 billion each. But perhaps their greatest achievement is helping convince the world that global warming doesn't exist. In the early 1990s, a scientific consensus began to emerge that burning fossil fuels, such as oil and coal, was changing the Earth's climate. In order to protect profits, these industries devised a plan to reposition global warming as a theory and not fact, and designed what a recent Greenpeace report dubbed the climate change denial machine.
It's a network of corporations and think tanks, front groups, who try to lie about the climate science, stop policies that will solve global warming. Of all the dirty energy money that's coming into Washington trying to influence policies, Koch is the largest. Koch is the largest donor, and nobody's ever heard of it.
The denial machine works like this. As citizens, we generally don't trust what energy industry representatives tell us about climate change. But we do trust these messages when given to us by experts or by our peers. In 2007, Koch paid scientists to publish a bogus study that polar bears weren't being affected by climate change. They've invested millions of dollars, turning George Mason University into what Mother Jones magazine called the haven for climate deniers, and even underwritten denier conferences. But while the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change brought together over 600 authors from 40 countries for their latest report, renowned skeptic Steve Malloy admits that his side is vastly outnumbered.
It's really amazing, and it's really sort of a band of about 25 people, I guess, maybe a few more. And most recent polls show that more people feel more strongly on my side than on the Al Gore side.
So how is such a small minority overcome an almost total consensus among climate scientists? Here we come to the true genius of the denial machine, the echo chamber. In order to give the impression of a genuine scientific debate, the Kochs have funded dozens of supposedly independent think tanks whose army of staffers disseminate this doubt throughout the media and launch coordinated attacks on real climate scientists. They've created Americans for Prosperity, who poses concerned citizens.
Stop in Wichita today for a national group on a hot air balloon tour.
A hot air tour, a rally against what organizers call global warming alarmist legislation.
They fund business groups, women's groups, college groups, seniors groups, and even church groups, all adding to the chorus of climate denial. Add to this the tens of millions the Kochs have funneled into lobbying and political donations, and it's not hard to see why no political action has been taken. The denial machine, it can't change the science, but its brilliance in shaping public opinion has helped the Kochs' income soar, while the rest of us get taken for a ride.
Okay, so that, going back to you. Hold on. Okay, so onward. So the other 5 manipulation tactics. So deflecting responsibility and shifting blame to the very communities they pollute. So as we know, even with BP's report, not even especially, the way they released their assessment of the Gulf oil spill, it of course pointed fingers to everybody but themselves. In February 2021, President Biden referenced Cancer Alley and its legacy of polluted air that prompted Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy to attribute the reference as a slam upon the state, and talked about people working tirelessly to make the state cleaner, and certainly acknowledging that there is high rates of cancer, but attributing this to lifestyle choices like smoking, overeating, and so forth. So again, blaming the community, but not in any way attributing it to the surplus of chemical factories. And so again, he even featured in an ad hitting President Biden's comments about the oil and gas industry. So again, we just have the shifting of blame constantly in the context of these challenges. Yeah. And so whether it's shifting blame to the communities, shifting blame to the media, it's always, again, pointing the fingers outwardly. Amplifying job creation while downplaying the lack of safety and quality in these jobs. So there was a TV commercial from API, the American Petroleum Institute, where they're talking about all the jobs that are available in the manufacturing industry. Again, this notion of a manufacturing renaissance, where it's all about kind of gas and plentiful jobs and clean air in so doing. And again, with this notion that natural gas is an investment in all Americans, quote unquote. And so, and for us, we know that that some of the jobs that are created are the healthcare industry, because it's our communities where African-American children are 3 to 5 times more likely to enter the hospital from an asthma attack than 2 to 3 times more likely to die of an asthma attack. That we know that 76,000 coal miners have died of Black lung disease and counting since 1968, while the National Mining Association lobbies against the very regulations that will protect them from coal mine dust, and all the statistics, so on and so on. The uranium mining is resulted in there being uranium mine worker clinics, like whole clinics devoted to, as if it's just an acceptable thing that all of these people are going to get sick from this practice. So, and then really pacifying the very same communities that are on the front lines of these impacts, and misrepresenting those communities, and trying to co-opt us to really be weapons of our own destruction, instruments of our own demise. And so this is why we put out that first fossil fuel foolery report, to kind of say, like, hey, this is what's happening. I know it's not clear when folks come to you, when folks that you recognize come to you, when folks that look like you come to you and try to sell you a bill of goods, but it's not what they're making it out to be, sad to say. And so we really are, again, this is our second volume, and trying to help folks to kind of see what's really happening. And it really did, it really has had impact. We have President Nwezi who decided, since we put out that first report, to denounce all relationship, and really the Florida NAACP was pretty much 100%, almost 100% funded by these fossil fuel industry folks. And she made a declaration like, okay, we'll be penniless before we take any more money from this industry, because now we see what they're actually doing to our community. But before that, they were very good at not just doing it because of doing what they were doing in terms of speaking out against clean energy and so forth because of money, but because these folks made a compelling argument, and they didn't really hear a good argument otherwise to say this, what they were saying was actually true. So it was a combination of things. But President Nwezi really had the boldness, the courage to step forward and say no more. And so when we were, and another story that we had in the first report was from St. Louis NAACP, where Peabody Coal was doing the same thing. They were giving them money every year, putting pressure on them to at least not oppose, but in some cases really trying to get them to support their efforts. But when the NAACP spoke about Peabody Coal at one of the mercury and air toxics hearings, then they said, oh, we're not giving you any more donations because, quote unquote, your people went down and spoke bad about us at the EPA hearings. And so that's when it was clear what the nature of that relationship was to the St. Louis branch, and it wasn't clear before. So subsequently, they were actually part of the St. Louis University's or University in St. Louis effort to get a Peabody Coal person off of their board of regents because they actually started to see the way that these companies are operating. Similarly, with Virginia NAACP, there was, and this is where we talk about misrepresenting communities, where the Virginia NAACP was misrepresented by Dominion and really had to come out and say, no, we strongly oppose what's happening here. And in terms of erasure of African-American community history. And so this is where we, are constantly kind of under siege in that way. Similarly, in California, we had SoCal Gas, which was really giving the sense that, trying to get these communities, Black clergy and so forth, to say that this clean energy choice policy was actually going to be harmful to Black and Brown people. And they actually claimed that policy was, and being perpetuated by the mayor, was quote unquote getting a lot of heat from local Latino groups and the NAACP, which again prompted the NAACP branch president to say that that there were no claims made in opposition to the mayor's clean energy policy, and that quote unquote we're the ones who breathe this air, we are the ones who are dying, and so we're constantly having to be vigilant against efforts to co-opt us and efforts to misrepresent us because we're so under fire for both. And so again, this level of dishonesty, manipulation, out and out lying, something that, in addition to just trying to get from day to day, that we're constantly having to kind of clear our name and fight off these attempts to manipulate. So then praising false solutions while denouncing real solutions. Another quote from President Trump, I just left Montana and I looked at those trains and they're loaded up with clean coal, beautiful clean coal. Meanwhile, he made that declaration about cutting these quote unquote job killing regulations. We all know what the narrative should be around health and wellness and earth preserving regulations. And so again, this false memes continue, this notion of clean coal. I was driving through Pennsylvania and some of those places out, and just saw billboard after billboard about clean coal. So this notion of kind of falsely embracing renewables, or actually embracing renewables because they see it as a new revenue stream. So they seek to monopolize renewables and then quell what's really happening in terms of the emerging movement around energy sovereignty, energy democracy, distributed energy, and community ownership of energy. So we have Florida Power and Light, which was involved in this 2020 ballot initiative, the right to competitive energy market for customers and investor-owned utilities, to again really break this monopoly hold that they have over the energy sector, and claiming that the energy choice advocates were trying to do something that would actually result in raising rates. And when we were in Michigan a few years ago, that notion of the raising of the rates, and they actually had like a ticker on these commercials that showed how much your energy bills would go up according to their analysis. And it actually was successful in beating down what was in the Proposition 3. And so similarly, they're using that same tactics to say, yeah, we can try to go this clean energy route, but the fact is you're going to be paying all this extra money to do so. And so we know the reality. The reality is that marginalized communities, our communities, are disproportionately exposed to fossil fuel pollution. We know that fossil fuel emissions kill. We know that clean energy can power our nation, and as well as energy efficiency is necessary because we waste 45% of the energy we generate. We know that clean energy has health, economic, and environmental benefits, and among others, and that the new energy economy creates good, safe jobs with less investment that's needed and that transitioning to a new energy economy truly is the only solution. So those are the facts that we need to be advancing to push back on the 10 manipulation tactics. And so how do we do so? So we know another world is possible, and it's already happening. People are already resisting co-optation, like the Florida NAACP folks and so many others, that we are shifting the narrative and really talking about the revolution of the new energy economy. We're engaging in community-based participatory research to counter the false research that's happening under the motivations of the fossil fuel industry. We're educating ourselves as well as educating our elected officials. I always talk about how when I, 20 years ago, when I was sitting around a circle in daycare singing Itsy Bitsy Fighter, I never thought that I would even say the words utility business model, much less have to understand it. And so this is the place that we're in, having to do all of this that we're doing to understand these complex systems and so forth, so that we can really be advocates and turn them around and get them back, get them to a place that actually works for us all. And then we're an active part of building the new. You're all out there building microgrids, doing energy efficiency, weatherization, and retrofits, tying it to work around fair chance hiring for formerly incarcerated persons, tying it to work around building community wealth, really doing that intersectional work of what the new energy economy, new economy more broadly should actually look like. We're engaging in participating in these processes. It was great to see all the people showing up for the FERC conversation, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, about their Office of Public Participation, and saying this is what it needs to look like for our communities. We're engaging in litigation and legal action where necessary. We're working on reversing Citizens United, advancing campaign finance reform. So we're as NAACP are working with our branches and chapters and anyone else. We're making sure that everything is open source. So this PowerPoint presentation, we'll make sure you have access to it. So everything we do, all of our toolkits, all of our trainings, we're making sure we're getting them all online. So that we're focusing on getting our 2,200 branches and chapters who are under so much siege around these things, that they have access to this information. We also want it to be open source, because we know to change everything, we need everyone. And we want to make sure that we're of service to the broader movement as well. So our toolkits, our visioning sessions, our strategy sessions, partner matchmaking with aligned partners. We are helping to provide recommendations on how to resource this work. So we have our email address there, which you can barely read, but we'll make sure that you have access to it if you ever need any. And so our next steps in terms of continuing this work, specifically around the fossil fuel work, is our Don't Believe the Fossil Fuel Hype video contest, particularly for youth leaders. Releasing our Transformational Climate Finance Toolkit, which we're calling Resourcing Revolutionary Resistance and Resilience. We love titles that all start with the same letter. We have our Cold-Blooded 2.0 report, which will be coming out this month. And another thing we are just finishing is our carbon pricing report, which will come out. And then we have our ongoing campaigns, the Cold-Blooded campaign, Power to the People campaign, Solar Equity Initiative, Black Labor Initiative on Just Transition, and so forth and so on. And just a kind of plug for this recently released Hoodwinked in the Hot House. I think it's volume 2. With a lot of groups coming together, Indigenous Environmental Network, Climate Justice Alliance, and others, really calling out the false solutions. This is a video I would have shown you, but I want to make sure we have time for chatting. So we have 17 minutes left, so I'll just leave that and recommend that you see it. It ends on it would have ended us on a more inspirational note, a little poem that a woman in the Marshall Islands wrote to her baby, and really kind of talked about the type of movement that we need to change the world. But I invite you to look at that at your leisure, dear Martha Filipino. So definitely looking forward to this Q&A. I'll turn it back to Tina, I think, who's moderating.
Great, thank you, Jacqui. That was impressive and amazing and informative and educational and eye-opening and all the things that it needed to be, because I think oftentimes when we're doing this work or in our communities, we know that there are things out there that are working against our own self-interest, but we don't always know what they look like. And so I just want to say thank you for just putting the work into helping communities to be able to engage and have resources at their fingertips, because it's powerful. knowledge is power. And so it's grateful to see you creating resources that create more power for folks. So thank you for that. I actually I wanted to start with a question, and I will open up to everyone else. With the new administration and the work that it's planning on doing with the Build Back Better plan and the investment in communities, and then also this new commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement, how do you see, or what do you see the role of the fossil fuel industry being or shifting with this new approach, this new forward-thinking approach to addressing climate change, environmental justice impacts, and so I'm just curious what you're thinking, because it's a very different space than where we were like 6 months ago.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. You know, it's a concern because in the ACP, I mean, in the administration, that's what you said. Anyway, the administration has even under other administrations before Trump, you know, still played, you know, under President Obama even played an obstructionist role in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. I mean, that yes, it was better than the last 4 years and we weren't even in it, but it still wasn't great. And so the good thing now is that there is a stronger commitment and hopefully more of an opening of what we can hold the administration accountable to in terms of as exponentially more ambitious commitments around the NDCs, and really matching this, matching the demands from the globe for accountability to real strong commitments that we're implementing domestically. But I am concerned that the fossil fuel industry still holds too much. I mean, we saw what happened in terms of campaign promises by this administration in coal country. We saw what happened with campaign promises in fracking country. And so it's something that we, the people, need to really help to push back on, as well as making sure that we are better as people about saying that, as opposed to kind of saying, yes, we need to do this clean energy stuff, and oh, we need to make sure that the transitioning workers are taken care of. Like we have to have like on the same parallel, like, you know, same, not parallel, but integrated and of equal importance to say that there's going to be pensions, that there's going to be high road careers, that there's going to be healthcare and so forth. That needs to be said in the same sentence, like with the same level of importance as the renewable portfolio standards, as the energy efficiency, you know, as all the stuff. Like it needs to be on par, and it needs to be really in conversation with the folks who are being impacted, so that they're actually leading on the messages, and they're defining what justice will look like in the new energy economy. So I think that, yeah, so hopefully that kind of gets an answer to your question. The long story short, the fossil fuel industry will continue to be obstructionist as long as we have this tie between money and politics, and politics. We're going to continue to have that level of interference. And we need to get money out of politics, and we need to have a much better relationship with the frontline labor workers, so that we have an agenda that works for everybody. And we have to make sure that we're pushing away from this notion of scarcity. It has to be either jobs or environment, either health or jobs. Like we have to recognize that we can have all, and that, yeah, the scarcity is just a total myth that's perpetuated by people who are trying to enclose wealth and power in the hands of a few. So that's what I would say in a nutshell. But, yeah.
It's a big nutshell. It's perfect. Very well said. Someone's asking about where the future publications could be found. I believe it will be on your website. There's a on the. Did you want to say that, or put it? I can put it in the chat if you say it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm always having to Google things myself, but conceivably it will be on the NAACP site in some way that will be visible. But we'll continue to do things like this in partnership with great folks like you, to make sure that we do have these various avenues to make sure that people know that these things are coming out. So so stay tuned. Yeah.
And for the network members, we'll have links on our resource page for members so that you'll be able to go to those sites as well. Go and see those documents when they're available. I'm going to open up to the floor for any questions. I use my facilitator power. If you have a question, you can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Someone in the chat is asking, in your report, you discussed the fossil fuel industry delaying progress in order to dominate the green market. Can you say more?
Yeah, definitely. So just as an example, they came to, so they through Florida, once again, this was before they took their pledge, they advanced this this resolution on net metering, these same entities. And net metering, for people who don't know, but it's a way to make sure that if you're generating solar energy, for example, then you can, the excess energy you generate that you're not using for your household, you get credits that goes back into the grid, and you get credits for that. And so, so of course, the fossil fuel industry and the investor-owned utilities folks are very much against that, because that really puts the power in the hands of distributed generation, literally and figuratively. And so they put forward this resolution on net metering, and it was kind of like, we support solar industry, we support solar energy, and we support clean air and so forth. But then in it, and it was literally straight out of Alec's playbook. But then when you kind of read the whereas clauses, you start to see all the realness there, in terms of like saying that they support it, but actually saying we support it only under the terms that we control every last aspect of it. So that's the example of it. That's scary. Yeah. Exactly. The devil is very much the devil in all of his minions. So yeah.
Hey Jacqui, this is Joe Womack. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Very good to see you.
Good to see you again. More of a comment than a question, but I'm glad to see that the fight for environmental justice seem to be a big part of the fight against systemic racism. And I think that's important, because there's with the George Floyd and other murders going on, all that need to be interwoven together, because it's part of the same thing. So I'm glad to see the NAACP and they're struggling and fighting and punching and everything else. And you're still a big part of it. I want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you're always inspiring. So yeah.
He's always inspiring, and he's always on time. The two things I appreciate about him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions from folks? Yeah. So this is from Gabriel. Do you want to talk, Gabriel? Do you want me to read it for you?
Oh no, I just wanted to introduce myself. That's all, because you all don't know me, I don't think. Well, I'm a consortium fellow back in the day, originally from Latin America, Hispanic, and I've co-wrote the Environmental Justice Toolkit that the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area published for the 24 jurisdictions in 2017. I don't know if you know Tamara O'Toole's Laughlin and others. Right now, I just manage a team at Planet Tracker. We're a not-for-profit, right? And we specialize in taking financial data, like investments, off a large, like all the databases you hear about in the news, and putting that into files that are useful and free for organizations, everybody on the call. So like Healthy Gulf said, who's the list of every single owner of Formosa Plastic? So I pull up the list. It's like 10,000 companies. I sort it, make it pretty, blah, 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 send it to them. Because that's what it takes me 10 minutes to do that. And because that's the type of data we have access to. So obviously just reach out. A recent paper, Stormy Outlook the webinar was with UCS and Gretchen Goldman. And so just introducing myself. Our work plan this year is going to include, we're trying to map all the petrochemical facilities in the US and by county also, so we can link the environmental justice, but looking at the ownership. And so if you
Yeah,
want to
what
participate in that, just
Yeah,
let me know.
I'm happy. What I will do is add your what you put into the chat box to our resource page for our members. So thank you for that,
Yeah,
Gabriel.
whatever works. Yeah,
Yep,
I'm just
no
here,
problem.
so thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions or comments from folks on the call?
Well, folks are thinking, to Gabriel's just last thing, I was just having a conversation with these folks from the Rhodium group. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but yeah. And about this notion of them mapping the service areas for all of the various investor-owned utility groups. Because, yeah, like recently I was online. I mean, I had to do a statement for a press release about Duke, actually about the same thing I was talking about earlier. And so I'm online, like, you know, looking at their service area, trying to overlay it with my very basic GIS mapping skills. It took like a whole weekend just to pull out this one quote, you know, because I wanted to be really rooted in data. And like you said, if you can do that in a minute, you know, in a couple of minutes versus what I'm trying to do, it would be good. So I'd love to talk more at some point about that. And I think our units and various communities who represent this call, I think would really.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things. I was just going to take your information and email you later, because one of the things we're trying to do is create these resources and these tools for our members and our communities to be able to have access to grab information that they can use when they're going forward to fight their fights or to communicate out what their issues are. And so these tools are really important. And it's glad to know that there are folks out there who have these resources who are willing to share them. So you're not off the hook yet, Gabriel. Question
good.
from Ramsey. Within the NAACP, I have really been loving Kevin Miles' committees training modules. This would make an excellent training for local ECJ communities and XCOMs. I don't know what the XCOMs is.
Executive committees, NAACP subgroups. Sorry, it was insider speak.
Okay.
Yes, no, absolutely. So Kevin, we've been trying to do, yes, Kevin's been working with us to try to get us on his training schedule. So I'll let him know about this particular special request. So yeah, thank you. Also, Brian had a question. What types of tools does NAACP offer in its toolkit for communities? So yeah, it's everything from, we have a Power to the People toolkit that talks about how to organize around some of these issues. We're coming out with a toolkit called Fumes Across the Fence Line that's following up on our Fumes Across the Fence Line report in ways that communities can organize around oil and gas. We have our Coal-Blooded Action Toolkit, ways that communities can organize around coal. But the Power to the People toolkit are ways that people can organize around energy efficiency and clean energy and energy democracy and so forth. As I mentioned, we have our Resourcing Revolutionary Resistance and Resilience, because we specifically want our communities to know what kind of funding models do we want to advance that are really keeping money, building our wealth, building our self-determination, building our autonomy, and not getting tied in with these extractive investments in our communities. And even some of the what's supposed to be positive investments like opportunity zones that kind of come in as a Trojan horse that really ends up being kind of boondoggle for the investment, for the investors and so forth, and the developers. And so really helping to provide resources or information on what resources are good for our communities and what financing models are good for our communities. So those are a few of the types of toolkits that we have. Thank you.
Jacqui, I'm going to ask the final question. We only have 2 minutes left. And my question for you is, you know, in the work that you do across the country, and you're pretty much a global person, you're not just in the US with NAACP and the communities in the US, but you work in Africa. I know you're committed to global communities who are dealing with the challenges of climate change and environmental injustice. And I would love just to have you share with us before we close out your vision for how we are moving into the future.
Yeah, thank
Foolery.
Okay. So definitely, for one, it's it's what I just said a little bit ago about this notion of abundance. Like, I think that we really need to get that across, because there's so much of what we have, like whether it's the founding of this country, where people seem to think that there was an inverse relationship between them doing well and having to oppress other people, whether it's the murder and displacement of indigenous folks, or getting on a ship and going all the way over to Africa to collect and enslave Black folks, like. And so, like, all the ways that the scarcity mindset and the domination and extraction mindset have been just pervasive, and so we really need to kind of shift that, not just the narrative, but the belief and the value of community and togetherness. And similar and related to that, I mean, we talk about global. We work a lot with the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance and others. Is really recognizing that those types of interconnectedness, that type of interconnectedness as well, and recognizing that as we think about abundance and as we think about our relationship not being that inverse relationship, but actually opposite, that we rely on each other to be well, and as such we have to think about, like, as we're doing policies to shut down coal or gas or so forth here. We have to, again, on the same level, have policies of pushing against exports of coal, against exports of liquefied natural gas. So, like, how do we make sure that, and it seems kind of maybe overwhelming and exhausting, but at the same time, if we're all kind of thinking together about how we are interconnected, then everyone gets in that mindset, and we don't have this kind of notion of unintended consequences, because we're being intentional about what we do, anchoring what we do in our connection to and love for each other and the earth. So it seems like often when I say it, it feels like a little bit like namby-pamby, but it is, I think, the key to really the transformation that we need to make. So
great. Thank you for that, Jacqui. And thank you all for joining us today for our webinar on Fossil Fuel Foolery 2.0. What a great presentation. This will be shared on our YouTube channel for NBEJN for folks who would like to see it or to review it again. And then, of course, it's on our website for our members in the membership portal. So I would like to say, again, thank you to everyone.